Hi, thanks for hanging out. Today we're going to have a look at my mobile miter saw station, some of the features and some of the things that I thought about when building it, and the actual build itself. Let's get after it. Before we get straight into the build, I wanted to take some time to talk about the decisions I made about the miter saw station and why I've ended up with the design and style that I have. So I've got quite a small workshop to do all of my work in, but I've got quite a few tools that are semi-portable. So the thicknesser, drill press, the miter saw and the metal chop saw there, and I just don't have the room to store those and get them out and use them on a bench when I do need to use them. In fact, the bench that I've got's really not big enough to be able to use them on full stop. So I was always working around other pieces of equipment and workbenches to be able to get the work done that I needed to. So I needed a solution for that. The other thing that I needed to be able to do was make this mobile. This shed is not large, and so when I want to be able to bring a car in, for example, I need to be able to get the workstation out of the way so that I can actually get the car in. To make a bench wide enough for the miter saw to sit on and have a reasonable amount of surface area to be able to put boards and things like that on, it would have been quite deep away from the wall, whereas I've managed to make this 600 millimeters or 2 feet in depth, and so it sits quite nice and flat against the wall. Being mobile, when I do need to work on something, I can just pull it forward and give myself space at the front, behind, or at either end of the workbench as well. In my mind, the criteria I used for selecting tools to go into the mobile miter saw station was anything that wouldn't fit in my mobile shop drawers. So these are just a pretty standard set of drawers that I made a little while ago. So all of my smaller handheld power tools and accessories for those tools, spare sanding sheets and things like that are in there, and that's mobile as well, so that I can move that around. The other thing that I made sure that I did was to make the miter saw station the same height as the mobile shop drawers that I've just shown you, which is also the same height as my table saw. So I can line them all up next to each other and have a nice long flat work surface to be able to manage larger sheets or long boards and not worry about having to have too many stands and other things like that supporting the workpiece as I'm working. So the other thought I had in mind was not only just storage of the tools themselves and somewhere convenient to put those and have those able to move with the unit as I need to move it around the shop, but also having a place to mount those as well. So I've got the miter saw station set up to be able to mount the thicknesser, the drop saw and the metal chop saw too. And I've got the fence able to move to be able to accommodate all of those pieces of equipment in the one spot, and I'll show you that shortly. So what I built into the miter saw station is this drop down area, which I made to the largest dimension of either of the 3 pieces of equipment that I'm going to mount into here, and that was the miter saw, the compound miter saw. So the depth of this means that sits in here, and the surface of that is beautifully flush with the sides of the miter saw station itself. For the thicknesser and the metal chop saw, what I've done is I've just built little stands for those to be able to sit on. So they're just pieces of wood that I've either had to laminate together or just cut the size that sit on top of here, and then I've got threaded inserts mounted into the top of the table itself, and then bolts that will screw everything down so they're all nice and rigid to the table itself. And I'll show you all of those set up in a little bit, and just the changeover between the piece of equipment. So in this centerpiece here I mount 3 tools: the thicknesser, the compound miter saw and the metal chop saw. The fence moves to be able to accommodate each of those pieces of equipment. There are other areas on the miter saw station that I've got other inserts mounted in for other tools as well. So the drill press, it's just a tiny little bench drill press which I can get up and out of the way, and also a combination sander, belt and disc sander, that is able to mount nice and rigid to the surface itself. For convenience, the other thing that I've done is I've started to mount bits and pieces onto the inside of each cabinet where the tool is. So here for the compound miter saw, I've got the 4 bolts that screw it down to the miter saw station itself, and then I've got a spare blade mounted onto the side. So each tool that needs to be mounted is a block with the bolts in it, and some of them have got accessories too. For the drill press, there's the chuck key, and for the metal chop saw, there's the Allen key that adjusts the fence. And down here I've mounted a cheapy set of T-handle hex keys with help with the mounting hardware and tool adjustment. I'm now going to run through the 3 pieces of equipment that get mounted in here, and I'm going to show you how I've got that set up, and also just a little bit about the movement of the fences as well, and just where they'll sit for each piece. Let's get to it. For the fences, just take the hex key, loosen the bolts, and they can slide all the way back or all the way forwards. The other thing that allows me to do is when I set the miter saw, there's a little bit of play in the holes that all of the tools get mounted with. So what I can do is I can adjust the fences each time I put the tool in, just to get those perfectly in line with the tool, because I just haven't got the luxury of mounting it permanently, and so I just need that flexibility built in. So that's it, that's the miter saw installed. I can install dust extraction if I want to as well. And then what I do is I just get a nice long straight piece of timber and just adjust the fences accordingly. Okay, let's swap that out for the thicknesser. So that's it, that's the thicknesser done as well, and timber can come out of there and nicely slide across the surface of the top of the miter saw station perfectly. What I would do is I would move the fences all the way back so that they're well out of the way and not going to interfere with any timber at all. Alright, let's install the chop saw. So that's it, that's the metal chop saw installed. These bolts I needed to get a little bit longer, that's why they're hex head and not the button head hex bolts that I've got in the rest of the miter saw station. But that's okay, I just need to grab a 13mm or 1/2 inch spanner to be able to just tighten these down, and that's it. That's all nice and rigid now. So the only thing I haven't mentioned at this point is that all of the shelving that you've seen in the miter saw station is all custom sized to be able to fit the tools that I've got and everything else that I needed to be able to put in at some of the larger hand tools that are too large to fit in my small mobile shop drawers. So that's something that you should think about and consider as well when you're building it, is to not think that you need to do it in a particular way, but you're certainly able to customize it so it doesn't look symmetrical in any way whatsoever, but is perfect for what my needs are. So very happy with it overall. Let's take a look at how I've built it. I've got 3 sheets of plywood for this build, 24 by 12 by 17mm thick, or 8x4 by about 11/16, or just over 5/8 thick. We're going to rip those down to make the carcass. Let's get to it. Just going to mark out now where I need a straight edge, and then we'll just rip these to length. I've just got the router set up to be able to cut a couple of grooves where the board's going to sit, that the machines are going to sit on. Perfect fit. Getting ready to install the wheels now. What I've got is I've got 8 of these wheels. They're a 75mm diameter or 3-inch diameter wheel. They'll take a weight each of 50 kilograms or about 110 pounds. So I've got 8 of these all together. So that'll take 400 kilos or about 880 pounds of weight. And there's going to be a few machines that are in here, so I wanted to make sure it was beefy enough to be able to handle that. I've got 4 of these with a locking mechanism on them and 4 that are just swivel casters. So 3 of these are going to go down one side, and then I'll put another one of these on the end. The process is just going to be to just mark a hole that'll be enough in this plywood to be able to start to drill the self-tapping screws, and that's what I'm going to use to hold these. I'm not going to bother bolting these in. They're pretty hefty screws. They'll be plenty strong enough for what I need. Let's get to it. So the idea of this was to have this the same height so that I could use this as an extension on either end if I needed to, and that's lined up perfectly. Very happy with that. Now I'm just going to rip the 2 long pieces that I'm going to use to make the split fence that'll go along the back of the unit. Got a 45-degree chamfer tool in the router now, and I'm just going to put a relief on the bottom of each of the fences just as a bit of sawdust relief. Just use some corner clamps just to be able to get this lined up perfectly. I'm just going to pre-drill it and then I'm going to glue it and screw it together. I've just cut some little pieces of wood that I'm going to use to be able to brace the fence. I'm just going to cut some reliefs in the corners just so that they don't bind up in the corner, and I'm just going to take a little bit of a 45 off here just so that it's a bit more user friendly on the back side. Just going to glue and screw these in place. I've compressed it together and I've got a pilot hole here, so I'll be able to screw one end in first and then flip it over and do the other end. Just mark the spot where I want to drill the hole for the threaded timber inserts that we're going to use for holding down the fence. So I'm just going to drill a pilot hole and then I'll drill it out to size to be able to screw in the insert. That's what we're using. These are the only bolts that I've got. I'm going to cut them down obviously just to be able to make it a little bit more user friendly to get these in and out. So what I'm going to do now is I've got this extra board which I'm going to put in underneath the support board for all of the tools, just to give me a little bit of extra depth and a little bit of extra strength. So I'm going to glue and screw that in now. getting set up to be able to start to mount all of the tools to the saw bench. So what I've got is I've got a nice piece of board that's got a nice straight edge on it, and initially what I've done is I've just lined up the fences to that and just sink those down just a little bit to keep them nice and square. And then what I can do with the drop saw is I can push that into here and push the fence up nice and firm against this board as well, and that'll give me a nice positive surface, and I'll know that that's perfectly aligned, and then I can just drill my holes, and then there'll be a little bit of wiggle room in the holes, and then I can just adjust the fences when I install the saw as we need to. So let's get to that. So now what I can do that I've got the saw installed is that I can put a nice straight edge on here, and I've got enough adjustment in these to be able to get those lined up with the saw perfectly each time, and I'll just tweak that as I need to. The next tool I'm going to mount is this Triton TPT 125 thicknesser. What I need to do with this is I need to get a couple of blocks underneath each side of it in order to be able to lift it up to get it nice and flat with the table. It just so happens that 2 thicknesses of the plywood works perfectly well for what we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut up and glue laminate a couple of these pieces together for each side, and then that will give us the support that we need for the thicknesser when we put that in place. I've got the chop saw exactly where I want it, and I've got the little support pads exactly where I want those as well. So I'm going to drill the holes now and then get the hardware mounted for it. What I've done is I've got the timber fences on the miter saw bench pulled all the way forward. I've got slots in the back of those to give me plenty of play, and I've got this fence just a little bit behind that, which will give me the room to be able to get those nice and straight in line with this when I need to use it to cut. This has also got 2 extra spots to be able to mount the fence to, which are further back, and they're 80mm or around about 3 inches apart, and I've got nearly 4 inches of travel in my fences, so I should be fine. That's another project wrapped up. I'm very happy with the outcome of the mobile miter saw station. It gives me plenty of storage space for all my tools, a great secure place to store them, plenty of adaptability for anything that I'm going to need to cut or use it for, and it's going to give me much more space inside the workshop to be able to use, which is really what the goal was in the first place, which is fantastic. I hope you enjoyed the video and perhaps got something out of it for your workshop or your project. As always, please feel free to leave any questions or comments that you may have. And remember, life's short, so get after it.